Okay, so HTML is the side of basically what your website actually physically is structured like, all right? And always has two what are called tags in it, which are just the tag HTML and then HTML like that. I spelled that wrong. That's why it's not nice coloring it for me. Now, if you've done anything with XML before, or HTML is just a subset of what XML is. These tags here that have the angle brackets around them, they're called elements or tags, right? They always pair with each other. There's an opening one that doesn't have a backslash, and there's a closing one that begins with the backslash, and they're always paired together like that. Whenever you have subtags in it, so for example, there's a tag called body, which you're going to put all of the content that a user would see inside it. You would never have the situation where you would close a tag outside of one like that. All right? They're always completely nested inside of each other. Right? So you'd have this would be an invalid situation, so I'll go do it correctly. This is the real one. All right? This is like, you'll actually have an opening tag, another opening tag, a bunch of opening tags, and then you'll see them start closing and opening new ones and closing. But just like parentheses have to stay matched to opening and closing, HTML and XML tags are exactly the same way. All right? The only other structure that we need is there is another piece of HTML tags called head. And we'll close it again. And head stands for heading. It's basically the all the stuff the user doesn't see, the metadata of your page, the stuff that, like the title of the page, or links, or if you need to pull in other code to execute on your page, JavaScript code or CSS or something like that, you'd put it up in the head, but you wouldn't actually want the user to see all those details, so it goes in the head tag. All right? So there are two kinds of elements that we are going to care about the most. We're going to come back to the head in a second here. All right, you can type in text anywhere you want in this, and just like, this is some text in the body. All right, and I'm going to go open that web page on my computer here so we can start seeing it. And right there, I have my very first simple, stupid web page that is just, this is some text in the body. Right? That's totally valid. It's just white, black background, black text, nothing fancy on it whatsoever. Because text is allowed to go pretty much everywhere across my fingers. There's a couple places on the page and certain elements you're not allowed to put text. But even if you do it wrong, both Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, all of those generally will just kind of do its best and interpret it for you and just like, oh, you probably meant this, and fix it. So that way, even if you screw up a lot, Chrome will, and Firefox and stuff will fix it for you. Right? But that's not super helpful. We want to be able to structure our text and data in better ways than that. And so we get two elements that are designed for that sort of thing. And the first one is called div. And a div tag stands for division. And I will put this in tabs over. Generally speaking, you would normally tab all of this stuff over, but because of the fact that everything is assumed to be inside the body at this point, I'm not going to just extra tab everything over to make it, because I think it's just really far to the right really quickly. So div tags are invisible to the user. They can't actually tell that they're on the page at all, but they help you logically structure the data and style it later, which we'll talk about with the CSS. So then I will say something like, this is div 1. All right, and then because of the fact that I'm allowed to have any number of these, I'm going to create a couple of these here. Now, quick thoughts. On the page, if I save this and I go, so I save the page and I go refresh the page in Chrome, what is it going to look like? You think nothing at all, just a blank white page? Anybody other thoughts? What do you think it's going to look like when I refresh the page in Chrome on this? On 3 separate lines, like that, versus next to each other? That's correct. All right? You notice the div tags themselves are invisible, all right, but the content isn't. And it automatically put line breaks in between my 3 divs, like that. all right? Because div is what is called a block level element. All right? Block level elements in HTML automatically receive vertical line space between them. All right? That is one of our main ways we are going to lay out data. The other one is called span. I don't know if that stands for anything other than span. So this is span 1. And this one I'm going to do inline, which is totally allowed. White space is meaningless in HTML as long as you're not inside a tag. Like this, technically here, I could put a bunch of white space here, and it wouldn't matter. HTML would just shrink that down to 1 space. It doesn't matter how much is there. But I won't do that just for sake of the lecture. It's easier to read this way. All right, and then I say close the span tag. And there's a duplicate line, yes. Notepad++, nice. Okay, how about this? What is my page going to look like now with the span tag on there? So I have 3 divs that break the text up like that. Span works differently. What do you think is going to happen when I save and refresh the page? You'll all be on the same line. Exactly right. And the reason why is because that span is the opposite of a block tag. It is called an inline tag. So HTML does not automatically input a vertical space for you as your layout. All right? This is nice for like individual little bits of things you need to style in a big long paragraph. Versus div tags are nice for like this particular paragraph is going to look one way, and the title bar across the page is going to look another way. All right? But generally speaking, these 2 elements are largely the only 2 that you need to make your site look how you want it to look. There are plenty of other things we're going to talk about with other types of tags, but for 90% of cases, these are the 2 tags you could do anything with. Basically, everything you need to do on your website, you could do with just these 2 tags. All right? And you can even force div. You can tell it, hey, act like an inline tag. All right, so there's some websites you'll run into which never use span. They just make the individual divs act like an inline tag instead, and then it's literally just a span. It's just purely personal preference. There is no way to make a span tag a block element, I don't think, though. That one is forced. All right? So there are other types of elements that we can add. That will give us some other sorts of the kind of free features. Another one is called unordered list, all right, or UL. Now this is one of those elements that I was talking about that you're not allowed to put text directly into it. All right, it would be it technically would show up in Chrome. It would render it for you, but it's not supposed to directly have any kind of text inside it. Instead, it's supposed to have separate elements inside it, which are called list items, or LI. So, list item 1. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this 2 times. And the nice thing about unordered list is just a bulleted list. So now we have 3 bulleted items, and you can have all sorts of cool fanciness with what those bullets look like. And list item 1, 2, and 3. And then lastly, the one I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to copy this and change only one little thing and make it an OL, or what is called an ordered list. Any guesses as to what that will look like? Instead of bullets, we get numbers. Yep. Nice and easy. List item 1, 2, and 3. So, oops. I forgot to typo on the page here. Didn't close out the element. So this, before I refresh the page, this is what I meant before. I didn't close it correctly. You start getting weird things like this because Chrome technically did render it correctly, how I told it to, and it like, oh, you didn't close your tags, and you left a bunch of tags open. I'll just do my best and lay it out that way. Like it tries to figure out what you intended, and no. So then you get a numbered list, and then automatically, whatever the user's language was, it would put the numbers in for their language or whatever. And if they don't use our style of numbers, English numbers. So, no, so far so good on those sorts of things. All right, there are hundreds of these sorts of tags that do all sorts of interesting things, like tables that can lay out information and grids and everything and stuff like that. And that will be left as something that if you are interested in the front-end design, you can go and research and figure that sort of thing out for yourself and learn it, or take that previously mentioned HTML, CSS, JavaScript class in the communications department that will teach you way more about all the cool things you can do with this. All right? But this isn't super great. It gets us there part of the way, but really it's super boring with black text on a white background. So we can start adding in things called attributes. These are called elements or tags. Everyone will use those two terms interchangeably with each other, all right, myself included. All right, apologies. But sometimes they will be called tags, sometimes they will be called elements. They are literally the same thing, all right? There's just different preferences of how you call them. An attribute is something about a particular tag in the same way that the @ sign in Java is about a particular method, or we said in C# on Tuesday, the square brackets are an attribute. An attribute here is some text, in this case style, followed by an equal sign, and then quotes. All right, and you're allowed to use single quotes if you want to. It does not matter, as long as it's consistent, so a single or both double or whatever. That's an attribute. I don't have any content in there yet, but that's what all attributes look like. They are the element name, space, the attribute name equals some value. All right? In this particular case, just so that it's easier to read, I'm just going to say font size and increase it. All right? And what I just did is added some CSS, and I'll talk about all about that details in a second, and what M means and everything like that. I refreshed the page, and it made everything twice as big. All right? Because M basically means a multiplier. And so I said multiplier 2 and make it twice as big as before. And now everything is big. Now, as you probably can figure out, I put this on the body tag so it applied to everything. But this style attribute, that can go anywhere you want. And if you put it on a particular one, it would only apply to that element. So I can go to this one here and say color red, like so. Style equals color red. Refresh the page, and then my first div is red. All right, or the font specifically is red. And I'll do one more here in another type of style. Background, color, green, and make this look nice and gross, something like that. Now, why do you suppose the green went all the way to the edge of the screen?
Because the div continues all the way to the edge of the screen.
Exactly right. It's a block level element. All right? Remember, we said inline elements don't automatically word wrap. What's really happening behind the scenes is that div goes automatically to the whole, it takes up the whole width of the block because it's a block level element. So if I did the same thing to this particular span and said style equals, say, text decoration underline. Now what I'm doing here on purpose is I'm picking a different style for each one, so kind of sub-teaching you about the different types of styles there are. But we are going to not even be looking at 0.01% of the options at CSS, which is what this is, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there is a ridiculous amount of styles, and now my second span only is underlined. All right, text decoration underline. And the cool thing about that is you notice it didn't automatically extend to the other ones because span is an inline element. It did not apply to the entire block, just to its own self. All right? Now, let's talk about the meta of this class for a second. Meta meaning not about the class itself, but about the rules of the class or whatever like that. One thing about this, I'm going to ask you a question throughout the course of the semester. And the question is going to be, what do you not like about this, or what do you like about this? All right? And I am expecting you to have no idea. All right? And that's important. All right? It's important that you don't know and you don't realize that you don't know yet the answer to the question, what do you not like about it, or what do you do like about it? And the reason why I say that it's important to think about it, even if you're completely wrong and you have no idea. An example of a question I will eventually be asking is, what are the security implications of the way I just wrote this controller? All right? And then I get just a bunch of wide-eyed stares from the audience. And people have no idea. I want you to guess. All right? When I ask that question, I want someone in class to make a guess of what they think, because what I am ultimately trying to teach you is intuition. All right? I want it so that when you are learning about this stuff and then I show you something, or me or someone else in the future shows you something, that your gut instinct is more correct more often than it's not correct. And I can't basically help you with that unless you train that muscle of your intuition. All right? So that question of what do you like about this, or what do you not like about this, is something that we're going to keep on talking about throughout the course of the semester. And it could be about the way I've written it. It could be about some security implication. It could be about the style of how I wrote it, or 1,000 or 1,000,000 other things. The important thing about all of this is that there is no incorrect answer. Even if I say, nope, that's not right, that doesn't matter. Right? Because if you say it wrong to me and your other classmates and stuff, who cares? Right? Like I said on Tuesday, this is the most safe possible place you could be wrong, right? To train that intuition muscle, right? But if you say something dumb in front of your coworkers a few years from now, then that's worse, all right? So get it wrong here so that I can help you figure out what the correct answer is, so that intuition gets better, all right? The other thing about that, the other thing about training intuition is your breadth of knowledge is much, much more important than your depth of knowledge on any given topic, right? The number of things you know is way more important than how deeply you know those things when it comes to computer science. So that when a topic comes up, like somebody says, hey, I need to know about XSLT. If you have at least heard about it and done a little bit of it, you're like, oh, I can volunteer for that. I know how to do that, at least a little bit, and I can learn the rest of the thing. But if you've never heard of it, then it's like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Right? So what I'm in this class, my focus is to increase your breadth of knowledge in web programming much more than the depth on any particular one topic, which is why we're only spending 2 class periods on any given thing. Right? Because I want to expose you to as many things as I can and give you a taste of them, so when an employer later on says, oh, has anybody done anything with Amazon queues? You're like, I have. I did that. All right? Even if you didn't do a lot of it, you've tasted it. All right? So anyway, back out of the meta again for a second. Is there anything about this that I've written so far that you like or don't like? Say again? Creativity. What about creativity? Absolutely. Yes, and so there's the CSS tags here that I've used. This thing followed by a colon is called a CSS selector, actually is the name of it. And there's seriously like 1 million, but I've shown you 3 or 4. So yes, there's certainly so many more things you can do, hence the awesome, amazing websites you've seen. Anyway, yes. One is creativity, certainly, yes.
Not like super verbose, it's kind of like shorter, div that like say it short.
What do you mean by verbose?
Like all the names of things are like
Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Versus like if you had a class name or something like that in C# or Java, they would actually have spelled out the word controller or whatever like that. Versus this isn't say list item; it says li. Yeah, and in general, HTML is very esoteric, unfortunately. That you just have to learn what li means and ol means and everything like that, and that kind of sucks. And that's good advice for how writing your own code. You write it in such a way that other people can consume it and pick variable names that make sense. Other thoughts? What is your to get on a different track slightly, what are your thoughts about, I have all this stuff here about the content of it here, and inside here, I specifically have said I want this one to be green, or this one to be underlined. All right? What are your thoughts about that particular thing? Things you like about it, maybe don't like about that I've specifically said this span is supposed to be underlined or green or whatever. Yeah.
Seems like once you decide for a line to be a certain color before it goes all the way entire block.
Uh-huh.
So if you wanted to do multiple things in a single block, you wouldn't have that option.
You wouldn't have that option, yeah. You would have to, if you wanted to do that, I have said the background color of this div is green. I'd have to create separate divs and style those individually. Yes, absolutely. So you basically lock yourself in a little bit to that overall div. Other thoughts? Yes?
It just seems to be a bit cumbersome if you're going to decorate each individual.
You're absolutely right. It is super cumbersome and actually terrible. Like this is one of those cases where I write it out on here, but this is something you would never do in real life. And if you did, I'll come tell your boss you shouldn't work there. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that. So this here is what we call mixing style and data. All right? One of the pieces of information that we have here is the data, which is all your list items and your text you're supposed to display and everything like that. That's basically the structure of the page, the data of your page. The other part of that is the presentation or the style of it. All right? Now, why would we want to keep those two things separate from each other?
If you want to ever update the style, you don't have to mess with the data and you don't have to weed through the style if you want to adjust the data.
That's exactly right. I could not have said it better myself. You do not want to force someone who is your developer that is in charge of your data or the person who's good with Excel documents and spreadsheets have to figure out, like, wait, which one's supposed to be green? Your graphic designer can mess with the style sheet and tell it basically, I'm going to change it to be green. Or let's say hypothetically, along those same lines, I wanted to make a Halloween themed website for the day. All right? I have to go through and change every single bit of thing that says green and blue and underline, and I have to go individually change each one. And we do not want to have to do that. That's the whole don't repeat yourself principle of code. The dry principle is that you only have to say it once. So I'm going to get rid of all of these style tags, all right? Because of the fact that I don't want them in there, we have a better way. Okay? And what our better way is, and we actually are technically already reusing CSS, but we're going to use it in a much better way now. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. All right? And the cascading part of it is the part that is the cool part about it. That is like, it gives you a lot of power. And we're going to use now the head tag for two things. One, I'm going to add a title to my page. So that's allowed to go inside in this place because of the fact that it's still, it's metadata about the page. It's not the contents itself. So lecture. Yep. So I'll go here, come back to my page over here for a second, refresh the page, and then you see at the top of my title of my tab now it has changed to HTML/CSS lecture. So like, sweet, I have a title on my page. The other thing that I'm going to add inside here is called link. All right, a link allows you to put some other external file and reference it inside here. And the particular one that I'm going to do is my style sheet that I already created. If you look on my hard drive here for a second, as a sibling to my lecture.html file, I have styles.css. All right, so if you haven't already created that, if you're following along, feel free to create that now, and it's just an empty text document. There's nothing in it yet. All right, and so I will type in a little bit of magic for a second. Rel is the type of this link, and our type of this link is style sheet. All right, it's an attribute, so and again, for your comment, it's like the relative type is what it's standing for, but they just kept it super skinny and made the text of all things not easy to read, but unless you already know what they mean, but just super skinny for whatever reason. And then we have text/CSS for the type of the element. And now the important part, href. And that is the reference, is what the, I forget the H stands for. I think it's just HTML reference is what the H stands for, but I can't quite remember. It's not important really, but it's the reference of where it goes. And since it's in the same folder, we can just do styles.css. Okay? And then I'm going to delete out this. And remember, actually, no, I don't need to delete it. I have a better idea. I'm going to change this one to my ordered list and make this one my unordered list, like that. The rules of style sheet precedence. I think I spelled precedence correctly. That's not my strong suit, is spelling. So, or grammar, for that matter. The styles.css. All right. Cascading, meaning cascading style sheet, meaning the fact that we have basically an order of precedence. If you are told to be green, red, and yellow at the same time, which color should you be? We will follow our list of precedence orders in CSS to figure out which one is called the most specific. All right, and it's usually whatever one is closest to the element itself. All right, so we already have seen one of them, and it happens to be the one that is the second most specific, right? And so I'm going to delete my list items here and start typing in the list of the things from least to most important, meaning the highest number in my list, because this is an ordered list. The 5 wins over the 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right? So my first one that we already did is the style attribute. That's one place I can put my CSS rules, and if I put it directly on the style attribute, that is considered super important, and it will override almost every other place that you put CSS except for one. All right? Another one that I have, all my text is nice and small again now, and I really would like to make it easier to read for everybody. So I can type the word body and then put my style inside braces. And the style is exactly the same as it was before. This time I'm going to follow it by a semicolon. And what this is a CSS selector, right? The selector, basically. I want you to select any tag on the page that is body and assign the style font size 2M into it. And if I go back and refresh the page, we have the same exact result I had last time. And my new, my one thing got, because the span tag doesn't automatically add breaks. Here's a cheap way to add breaks into your page quick, and we get an extra little mini bonus lesson. The BR tag stands for break. Basically, it just says put a vertical break into the page, all right? The slash at the end of the tag means it is self-closing, meaning I opened the tag break and I closed it all at once. I didn't have to reopen it. It was exactly the same as if I had written this. Right? It is purely shorthand for open the tag, close the tag. Like that, you can put the slash at the end and open and close it all at once. Right? And it's purely just shorthand to make it easier to read. And it's just less verbose. And there we go. I have now breaks. The rules of style sheet precedence from least to most. So we know about the style attribute, but now we know about a new one, and that one is less important than the style attribute, because I said that one is basically the most important, and that is the tag itself. All right? So if I just typed in the name of a tag, all right? But this works for anything. I can say span, target all spans and make the background color yellow. Okay, like so. And all spans now have a background color of yellow on the page. I didn't have to do anything else. They just automatically all have it. And now you can see I've separated out the data itself from the how I am choosing to style it. But as you could expect, it's not very common that you just style all spans on the page. or all divs on the page because of the fact that you're probably wanting to lay it out much differently than that. The body tag is, however, there's only ever going to be one. So that one is fine to write like that. All right? So another attribute that we are going to use a lot in JavaScript, it's going to come up all the time in JavaScript, is the ID. All right? And the ID is simply just like this. ID equals and div1, let's say. And that ID can be any variable string, meaning it's got to follow the same types of rules that when you create a variable in Java, those kinds of rules where you can't have hyphens in it and stuff like that. It's got to follow, it's gonna be, usually written in lowercase text with alphanumeric characters and numbers. And so then I'm just going to add a couple more things like this. Oops, put on the wrong one. Like so. And then I have ID div2 and div3. Now Chrome and Internet Explorer and all those will not enforce for you or tell you if you have accidentally duplicated a div, an ID. So if you have more than one element with the same ID on the page, it will just happily render the page for you. But JavaScript will absolutely hate that, because you'll ask for, hey, give me the div on the page that has an ID of div3, and if you have more than one, it will randomly give you one of them. All right? So it's a non-deterministic behavior, so you should not duplicate your IDs ever. So I can come in here and then say, like, all divs I'm going to make background color is background, come on, color red. And I'll get to why I'm putting semicolons at the end of those in a second. And all my divs have background color of red. But then I want to have it so that one specific div is a different color text. And you use the pound sign to say, I want to target or select, because these are CSS selectors, a specific element on the page. So I'll say div2, that specific element, I want its color to be, make it Christmas green. And I'll talk about actually right now why the semicolon's there. It's so I can have more than one style. So I'll make my Christmas one even bigger. So font size is 3 for that one. And then it got nice and huge and is green, and it targeted that specific div by its ID. And that introduces then our third type. All right, so the tag is one of the strongest, the least strong you can use. And so the next one in our list is the ID of the element. All right, and anything on the page is allowed to have an ID, and oftentimes will. Because any button or form element or anything like that on the page that you want to be able to use with code in JavaScript, you have to give it an ID so that you can access it through your code. All right, we'll talk about that on Tuesday. All right, so ID. And that one's, again, fine, but it's got the same kind of complaints we had about it before, that it's like, yeah, it's okay, we got it separated out so that this is just data. There's nothing in here about how I'm supposed to style it. But I still am only specifically targeting that div. What if I wanted to reuse it? What if I wanted, I wanted multiple Christmas divs? I can't, because I'm not allowed to duplicate that ID. All right? So the next one is the actual powerful one that we'll use 98% of the time. All right? And that is called class. All right? And you can just come in here and then say something like this. Class equals Halloween. All right? Something like that. And I'm going to do it on 2 of them to show you how cool this is. So I have class equals Halloween on 2 different things. All right? There's an attribute just called class sitting on there like that. And now I have to select those elements. So I come in here, and the dot operator is what is going to select classes for me. So I say dot Halloween. And my color is going to be orange, and my background color is going to be black. Okay. And then I come back here, refresh my page, and there you go. Notice as well, I had a rule targeting all divs on the page to be red. But because this is a more specific thing than generically all divs, this first one turned into Halloween, and that one turned, in the span, turned into Halloween. Didn't matter, the tag type. It's anything on the page that has a class of Halloween will gain that automatically. All right? So that's pretty cool, even if you don't like the front end. It's pretty cool how that works. All right? Say what? If you're in web programming, come on in. The 205. You had the numbers reversed. It's fine. Just take a seat. You're good. No, you're good. I have it recorded so that you can watch it later if you need to. So that gives us our third type on our list, which is by class. Okay? And there's only one other one that we're going to talk about, but we're not going to actually use it. And it's the one that goes on the other side of the style attribute that is even more important than style, and that is anything targeted with important, with an exclamation point like that. All right? If you any time and any place you put it, you can put a tag, like for example, this div here, I can put important sitting inside it like that, and basically say, this rule, that's the most important thing. I do not care at all about your CSS styling, cascading rules. I'm going to say that's the most important. Why do you hate that? Because you should hate it.
It's an exception to the rules.
Yes, it's an exception to the rules. So all of a sudden, you've got all these nice things about this goes there, then this goes there, and this goes there, and then you're trying to figure out, well, why is it blue? Because somebody somewhere in the code put bang important. This is the most important thing. It's supposed to be blue. And it broke all the rules. It's the equivalent to the go-to statement in C or Java or C Sharp. Basically, ignoring whatever you else are supposed to do this instead. All right? And it's just not wonderful. But it technically exists, so I put it on the list. And it is more important. It will override even a specific style sitting on the element. So all of these things can be combined together in really cool ways. So let's say I only wanted to target divs that had Halloween on it. I can just put div.Halloween. I can buy on the tag element. So now I need a div with a Halloween element. All right? Or Halloween class, sorry. Or we can do fancy things like this. So let's say I had a class on this. I'll do the third list item down here. And I'm going to put my class name is sad. All right? So I have a sad element there. And I also have a sad element up here. So class equals sad on that tag there. Now here's some really cool things I can do. Those are two list items, but they are children of two different types. One's a child of an ordered list, and one's a child of an unordered list. I can say, if you are an ordered list that has a child with the tag sad, or the class sad, then do this rule, color blue. If you are an unordered list that has a child with the tag sad, then do a background color of blue. So the operator for child is just space. Put a space between them. And that means you must follow this specific pattern of this element, target all unordered lists, then underneath that, target anything that is a direct child, that is a list item, that specifically has the tag sad. And then we will get something that looks like this. All right? And that's where the power of all this stuff working together starts really like shining. That you have the ability to put and be very specific here. And there's a ton of rules you can put in here. There's one that looks something like that, which is select, or it's a pound 3n, which is select every third time you find it instead of every one. Or the descendant operator. I don't care if it's a direct descendant of it. Just anywhere it's underneath it, even if it's multiple layers deep. And again, Not going to get into the details of all of that because there's a ridiculous amount of stuff there that you can learn and everything. If you want to be a front-end developer, you're really into graphic design and layout and website design, it is an incredibly powerful and expressive thing you can use to make your page look awesome. But everything I've said so far is pretty much the extent of what we're going to do for the coloring and everything like that, and these things here, which are called selectors. Except for one more cool thing. What if I had another tag, Easter, on here, which had color is equal to, say, Easter color, I don't know, pink. And then background color of light blue. I think you're allowed to do that. I think that's a built-in color. If not, you have to use the hex code color, the RBG code for it. And I have Easter in there like that. So I have something like that. And this is the part where it gets really cool. What would you think happened if I put two of them in here? Which one wins? Second one and first one? Show of hands. Who thinks the first one wins? Who thinks the second one wins? That's correct. So then I come back in here and oh, it's disgusting colors. Light blue works, though. It turns out light blue is a built-in color. But anyway, yes, the second one wins. Why do you suppose the last one wins?
It implies the first one, then implies the second one.
Yes, but why are you happy about that as a developer when it comes to strings? Yeah.
It means it's executing from left to right, like how you read it.
It is executing from left to right, but in terms of manipulating strings, right? It's easier to append it onto the end as you're manipulating strings. And that's one of the main reasons it goes from left to right, is that it's super easy to say, like, when we're going to eventually on Tuesday and Thursday of next week talk about actual JavaScript code and manipulating the page through code, you can just say .append. And then all of a sudden, bloop, it's on there and it's done. You don't have to do anything fancy. It's just, you don't have to like try to insert it to the beginning of the string and redo the string or anything. You just append it on the end and it works. I gotta put the longer timeout on this computer. It just keeps on logging me out. All right. So that can do some that can do some awesome things for us. All right. When it comes to page design. For example, if I had a one called warning and I wanted it to be just really important that you paid attention to this background color red and border to yellow. I think I don't remember the order of those tags. HTML, CSS border tag. Okay, it is border style property. No, that's not what I wanted. Border width. Where's the one you can set them all at once? There it is, border shorthand property. Okay. The other thing that's cool about CSS is that you have some rules like this that you can set more than one thing at the same time. So this particular tag, border, is 5 pixels, solid and red, solid being the style. I'm going to say my border is 5 pixels, solid and yellow. And then I can come into any element I want, and if I needed to, I'm going to take out my Easter thing from this one, and I'll basically say, well, the class of this one is warning, and my class of this guy down here is warning. I can add it in to anything else I needed to as necessary. And come back to my lecture page and refresh the page. And then you get all these nice bordered warning things. And you can just add them in. And an element can have any number of classes applied to it. And it just adds them from left to right. And if you have specified in there more than one background color, like so this one's supposed to be green, blue, and yellow, it follows this particular list. Oh, and I will update my list now that we learned all the rest about class. from left to right. All right? So it gets more specific the farther right you go. All right, that one wins. If there's 6 different things that tell you what color it's supposed to be, you follow this list, and it's like, oh, this one gets more and more important, and then literally like this is the one that's supposed to win at the end. All right? One last bit about div tags is you've seen those menus and stuff like that on pages. And let's see, make sure my page is long enough here. Just barely. Let's make this a little bit bigger, just so my page scrolls for what I want to say next. Okay, so it's nice and long. Okay, there we go. So my page scrolls. You've seen those menus on pages that no matter if you scroll or not, they always stay at the top of the page. All right? That's all it is a CS rule, or CSS rule. So what we're going to do is create an element or a style called top. All right? And we'll use another CSS rule called position, and we'll say its rule is fixed. And we'll say the top of it is supposed to be at 2% of the screen. All right? In a similar way that there are like 6 different ways to specify font size. You can do it by pixels or EM, which stands for like the relative size to each other. And there are several other ones that only graphic design people know about. But there's a bunch of different ways to specify. A point is another one that you'd probably heard from like Word documents or whatever. Just like that, there's a bunch of different ways to specify percentages. You can say pixels, size, M, percentage, whatever you can do. I'm just showing percentage here. So if you are supposed to be a top element, I want your position to be fixed, and I want your top to be 2%. All right? So I'm going to put a div just smack in the middle here, and I'm going to say its class equals top. This div won't move will be my text, and close the div. And just for the sake of making it easy to see, I'll put it as nice and big and make it warning at the same time. And I'll come up in here and refresh the page. And then here I re-scroll the page, and that one is sitting on top and not moving. All right, on the page, it just hangs out there, and it's 2% down from the top of the screen. But I'll make that even more obvious. Top is just a horrible name for this, so I'm going to actually change that to the word fixed, because that's better for what I'm trying to get across. And so we'll say top is 20%, and then my left position is 20%, and then we're sitting in the middle of the screens somewhere, and then it just moved. So it's right in smack dab in the middle of the screen. As part of your assignment, that's about making a div that does exactly that. Oh, yes.
Very reminiscent of pop-ups.
Yes. And it usually is used for menus. So what is different about this div than these other ones I created at the top? My Christmas div here. Anything notice anything other than the fact it's floating on top of everything? What is very different about that one than the other one? Yeah, raise your hand if you want to contribute. Yes?
It only takes up as much space as the
Yeah, exactly right. Any guesses as to why that is? Why it's only taking up as much space as it needs now instead of automatically filling up to the rest of the page? Yeah. It's related to the fact that it's always moving, but it's not quite right. Any other guesses as to why? All right, the main reason why is that once you met something as a position, you mess around that position tag. There's one more we're going to talk about other than fixed here. It no longer follows the block and inline rules. It automatically turns it into an inline element. And so it only takes the space it needs. All right? But we can force it to be bigger or smaller if we want it to. So I can say width is 50%, or I'll make it even obvious, 75%. So no matter what, I want your width to be 75% of the screen. And now it's nice and big to use up a bunch of space. All right, so now I can control its size. It's not a block element anymore, so I can make it huge or small or whatever. Then the other one that you'll need for your assignment, I'm going to copy and paste this one, and it's going to be called absolute. And so it's mostly going to be the same. Position, though, is absolute. And we'll put this one at the bottom side of the screen, so we'll say bottom. And the reason, just like I said earlier, the reason why I keep on changing these tag names on you is because I'm just trying to, while teaching you about HTML, also showing you a little bit about all the different types of CSS tags there are. There are so many that it's way beyond the scope of this. But I can style the bottom and the right of it instead of the top and the left if I wanted to. And that position is absolute. So this div won't move, but the other one, absolute. Do I still have my Easter tag in here? Yes, I do. I'll make this one Easter instead of warning so it stands out. This div will move, but relative to other elements. All right, and refresh the page. Now it's sitting down there. I absolutely positioned it over here instead of fixed positioned, but the one big difference is now I scroll the page, it moves with the page. So it will stay at the position you told it to be at the time the div was created, but it will scroll with the page instead. All right? So that is useful for those types of menus and stuff that sit on the side that you want the user to be able to scroll past it versus those top bars that always stay there. All right? Notice as well, this is a little side lesson, it's stuck on top of the other one when I scrolled it like that. All right? You can control that through a CSS element that I'm not going to bother called z-index. And z-index, you basically, by default, all elements have a z-index of 0. And the z-index of 0 will allow you to, if I go higher than 0, says lay it up on top of anything that has a lower z-index. And it can be any negative or positive integer. You can just start layering things on top of each other. So for the last 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about the assignment. So, a little bit about the assignments. They are always out of 100 points. All right? I need to update apparently. They're always out of 100 points. And they always have a numbered list of sorts of things that you need to have. The bottom 20 points is always the same on every assignment. It is basically professor's discretion of your style, formatting, completeness, and quality. All right? It's basically just how good is it overall is your solution. All right? And that's generally when I was talking about on Tuesday that your formatting is important and you do your braces correctly. And in the case of HTML, have things matched correctly in tabs, nice, and all that kind of stuff. That's just generally the catch-all of that. All right? The other ones will just tell you what they're worth and then what you need to do for that particular section. Stretch levels are extra stuff that you can do for reputation if you, especially for this first assignment, if you're one of the people that knows a lot about HTML and CSS already, you can do extra stuff at the bottom and just make sure you type it into Moodle so I don't miss it. All right? The rules. Every assignment also has rules. In this particular one, no inline styles or JavaScript. Those things that we were doing at the very beginning of class where I was just typing the style directly into the HTML document is against the rules. Right? If you break rules, that's where those 20 points start disappearing, if you break these rules. Yeah. No, the span is an inline element. Oh, wrong tab. The span is an inline element. It's not an inline style. The thing I don't want to see anywhere here is where this says style equals. Because that's you're declaring your style directly in line, meaning in one line with your element itself. That's the part that's against the rules. Using the span tag itself is an inline element. In many things in computer science, unfortunately, we overload terms all the time. All right? Second rule only applies to once we start getting into JavaScript. But error messages can't have those little allowing error alert pop-up boxes. And then external JavaScript libraries we'll talk about on Tuesday. So all rules are cumulative. So as we go out throughout this semester, we first are just starting with these 3 rules. But on all assignments, rule number 3 will always be the rule. All external JavaScript libraries must be referenced through a CDN. And then rule 4, rule 5, all these, we'll add new rules with most assignments. All right? So once we learn about asynchronous programming in C#, there will be a new rule that says all calls that you make must be done using asynchronous libraries if there's an asynchronous option available. All right? So just keep in mind, and I'll always print them all at the bottom of every assignment. And then on every assignment except the first one, it'll highlight that says new rule if it's a new thing. All right? So like all assignments, usually I'll introduce them on Tuesday. This is different because of the syllabus on Tuesday, but this one is due a week from today, keeping in mind reputation. So like if I got super busy, or I just didn't have time, or I didn't want to work on it, I don't care. I don't care the reason, doesn't matter. Then you can turn it in later if you need to. Just remember what that means for your reputation. A few late assignments that you, throughout the semester, you just had a really rough time, or you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or it doesn't matter to me. In the same way, it doesn't matter to my boss. The point was I didn't get it done. You do that a few times in the semester, I don't care, whatever. Do it enough times, I keep on seeing the fact your assignments are consistently late is when your reputation will start dropping. All right, and then you'll start losing that percentage of your grade that is part of your reputation. All right. The only other thing about that I will say is I grade assignments on Thursday night. All right. So after my son goes to bed is when on Thursday night, I will grade your assignments the day that they were turned in. So while you won't get late penalties on them, I make no promise of the speed I will grade it if it's not done at the time that I am starting to grade it. Right? So you just have to wait for your grade on a given assignment. All right? That is it. And any questions?
What was the third rule again? What does that mean, really?
We'll talk about that. It's not relevant to anything yet. It actually won't really be relevant until assignment 2. It'll only be relevant to assignment 1 as if you're working on the stretch levels. But that rule will really come into play by assignment 2. And we'll talk about what a CDN means. Okay? Feel free to email me questions if you have any. And don't forget, all of the assignment recordings of my solutions are available online on YouTube videos to watch them. And all of my submissions include all of the stretch levels in them, so you can even, if you have questions about that part. Have a good weekend.